I was formerly a management consultant, but about 10 years ago, I bought an apartment, I redesigned it, renovated it, put it on Airbnb. That did really well. Then I did a couple more. They all did really well. That gave me more confidence in my sort of design taste and ideas. And this whole Airbnb thing seemed to be a real thing. It worked. The numbers added up. So it's based in Medellín, Colombia, which has become quite a tourist destination in, I'd say, the last 5 years. When I got here 10 years ago in 2015, it really didn't have the tourist numbers that it does now, but I thought that would be something that would come, and that's exactly what happened. I always wanted to build a whole building rather than just taking, the existing structure and renovating the interior. And so I built a small hotel. Basically, this hotel sort of has one leg in the Airbnb world and one leg in the hotel world. So it's apartments, but it has 24-hour reception. It has a restaurant. It has a rooftop. All these kinds of things. And as a result of running that hotel, obviously, any owner wants to optimize their asset, their business, their operations, and that brought me to PriceLabs. It's gone really, really well. We had a lot of tailwinds because COVID happened in the middle of the construction, so that slowed construction down, obviously. But then at the same time, there was that huge travel boom after the COVID sort of got under control, and so that really helped us out. And then also the tourism market in Medellín just exploded as well. So it's been financially also a really, and then the product itself has resonated very well with the market. So now about 30 to 40% of our customers are repeat customers, which gives you a sense of people like what was built. And it's the only hotel I have, and now I'm looking for land for another one. So we have 18 apartments. There's 2 apartments per floor, 10 floors. The bottom floor is a restaurant and reception and also a little office space. And the top floor, there's 2 penthouses. And then at the back, there's a rooftop terrace. The kinds of folks that we have, I think it really depends on each individual market. Medellín is a destination people come back to a lot. There obviously is like a large number of tourists who come just the one time, like many tourist markets, but Medellín is only about 3.5 hours flight from Miami. It's about half the price of Miami. It's pretty famous as like kind of a party city, so people come back a lot. And it's also one of the world famous cities for reggaeton, which is also kind of party. So sort of comparable cities might be like a Berlin or Bangkok in that people really like it and they go back to it. And that's why I wanted to do apartments, because apartments, and now with digital nomads, which was, a thing starting like a long time ago, 15 years ago, apartments are a place that you can stay in for more than 3 days. I don't think many people would want to live in a hotel room. And so that was the reason I wanted apartments. But then within a hotel wrapper, you can kind of move more toward the longer term if it's kind of a slower period, and you can shift to like very short-term rentals in the high period. And the kinds of folks that are coming down, we're oriented at the high end of the market. So, we're not a particularly cheap option. But it's very nice spaces. So, the kinds of folks that would stay with us, there's a lot of entrepreneurs, digital nomads, programmers, lawyers, doctors, all these kinds of folks, mostly coming out of America. There's a few Canadians, some Europeans, some also Mexicans. In general, all of them sum up to one thing, which is delivering a great product and making for happy, great guest experiences. And then as long as you're delivering great experiences to people, they will come back. And that's why I think we have a very high repeat business. But that also basically is the never-ending challenge, is making sure that everything really is working at an optimal level all the time. Receptionists who really do care about the guests and really go the extra mile, that the housekeeping is working, that the building is being well maintained. It's basically a never-ending grind. The price of perfection is eternal vigilance, and that's always my predominant worry. And as long as that's going pretty well, then everything else I think falls into place. And pricing is part of that. So that's where PriceLabs helps me out. Before I was pricing it, I've been using PriceLabs since April of this year. Before, I was basically doing it by hand. Yeah, we have a PMS and all the rest of it, but I was changing prices up to like 2-3 times a day, particularly for the last minute aspect of it. And PriceLabs has really helped automate a lot of that. To be honest, I'm not, I'm not 100% convinced that, you really need to be glued to your competitors' pricing. It's not something actually that I pay a whole ton of attention to, because basically through your own occupancy levels, you're like a surfer. You're floating on top of a wave, and everybody else is surfing that wave with you. And the wave is as high as the wave is, and everybody does their thing. And the market is going to tell you if your pricing is out of line, because you're just not going to get booked, right? So ultimately, my occupancy is my ultimate arbiter. If I'm not getting booked, then that's basically I'm priced too high. My strategy would be sort of occupancy forward, occupancy based, but within that, there is a lot of calculation around, things like the portfolio occupancy, and then far out premiums and last minute premiums, and all of that PriceLabs has really helped structure. So as you mentioned, Saurabh, like a lot of it goes into the research. I think a lot of the research is already done by PriceLabs because of the way that it's structured, and that's very helpful. I can specifically say that in April, basically with the massive growth of hotel supply and apartment supply, so there was a tourism boom, and then demand went first and supply followed, and now there's an absolute flood of new supply entering the market, and that has a downward effect on prices, right? That's a reality. As I mentioned, you're surfing a wave, and the height of the wave you don't control, and neither the number of other surfers. So you accept the conditions as they are, and you respond to that. So we had quite significant revenue declines year over year as these massive new hotels were coming on stream. And what happened, it was sort of on the order of, the first 4 months of 2024 compared to 2023, probably revenue was down 18%-ish, across those 4 months. And then I sat down, a friend of mine who runs a property management company called Corsley, which I subsequently invested in based on, the success that I enjoyed, observing their suggestions, which was to use PriceLabs and also optimize the listings. So I had thought that I was pretty expert, but actually when I sat down and really looked at my listings on all these OTAs, I realized that there was many things that were unoptimized, on how I stood out compared to my competitors. How did I attract eyeballs? And so I did two things in April of 2024. I installed PriceLabs and started using PriceLabs, learned PriceLabs. And I also spent a lot of time looking at the OTAs and really getting into the deep weeds and the nitty gritty on how to optimize my visibility and, make an appealing listing. And the net effect of those two things was quite dramatic. It was an improvement of about 15%. Basically, the first 4 months of 2024, we pretty consistently saw between 15 to 20% revenue declines year over year. And then
Yeah.
after April, from May through to the end of the year, it would sort of be like there might be a decline of like -3% in one month or -7% in one month, and then some months were like up 8. So the average of both effects were visible. That the year-over-year monthly results were better after the listing optimization and use of PriceLabs, but then also the whole period results, the average of all those months was a lot better. I think it's the portfolio occupancy based adjusting, and the fact that I can set, far out premiums to that. And as the date gets closer and I'm unoccupied, I can have like progressively scaling higher discounts until I clear my inventory. That for me is probably the strongest feature. But it is also helpful basically having everything organized, well far out in advance. Also, parent-child relationships, so that you don't have to change prices on all of them. You just change price on maybe one or two, parent types, and then it scales all the way down through. That I think is pretty helpful. So after applying the things that I did in April were basically things that the CEO of a company called Midtown Stays, Tim Hubbard, he's on YouTube, look him up. Short-Term Rental Riches is the current name of the channel. He's somebody I've known for a long time and was following him over YouTube. And basically I sat down with him and he said, these are the things you need to do. And so we worked on that together and we implemented that, and we saw that 15% revenue improvement. And so as a result of that, I invested in his company and have started working with them because it is the future of property management. Essentially what we see is that, the difference between sort of unoptimized, possibly you might call it DIY kind of approach, is not an optimal result. And in the case of my hotel, and I thought coming from, again, management consulting, I thought that I was basically an expert, and I got a 15% improvement. And so that really opened my eyes to how there's so many different pieces to running a successful hospitality industry business, which is either a small hotel or an apartment hotel or, an Airbnb. All of it is a hospitality business, and the same principles and rules apply to all of them. Yes, of course, the dollar impact is much greater for a hotel, but it's on a percentage basis pretty similar for all of them. And so the future, I believe, of property management, given that there's always more competition, there's always more things coming in, more things to know. If you're running and owning one Airbnb or two Airbnbs and you have a full-time job and a family and, life is really busy, you don't have time to become an expert in 3 or 4 different areas and then always be managing guests, and you're always on, and it's an emotional roller coaster, right? And the same with small hotels. If you're owning, a 20, 30 unit hotel, you don't have the resources of a big chain or, a very fancy boutique hotel to have a revenue manager, to have, really, really high levels of resources you can dedicate to all these things. And because the gap is about 15%-ish, we started running a hotel in Costa Rica about 3 months ago, and we've doubled their revenue. It's incredible, and so that, I believe, is the future of property management. It hasn't happened yet. There are some good property managers, but I don't see yet a great product market fit among many property managers, and that's exciting. I think we're gonna really change the world with that.